So first up we've got here Paulie Madrid Rim State. Cool name, I like that. This one, so you'll see some of them I've increased or decreased in volume. This was, so basically there's two reasons for that. One is so that I can kind of compare them all relatively, and one is so that I can kind of hear them roughly at the loudness they'll be when they're mastered. Different styles are kind of mastered to different loudnesses, and that kind of that can depend on the label and the style, the genre, but generally like more like tech house stuff is mastered louder, more minimal deep house kind of stuff is mastered a bit quieter. But yeah, depends on the preference of the label and that kind of thing. But this one is a bit more of a kind of minimal deep house kind of thing, and you've had it like mastered super loud. So I don't know if you did the mastering or someone else did, but I would say like comparative to other releases, I think it's maybe a bit loud. But anyway, let's have a listen. Oh, I think that's probably just going to go to a bit more of an outro there, I assume, just from looking at the waveform. Really cool stuff, Paulie, sorry. I really like that. It's got like really kind of classy, timeless style. Really well done. The mixdown sounds pretty good for sure. I would say like it's a tough one because it's like it's done really well, but it's also not necessarily something that stands out stands out above other tracks in a similar style. What I mean by that is that like you've used like very classic sounds, which is cool, but it would be I think it would be cool to have something a bit more unique in there, something that kind of gives the track a bit of a signature kind of sound, like that makes it stand out, and so someone can hear it and go like, that's that track, I think that's something that's quite important. Even it doesn't have to be something that detracts from the kind of classy, timeless nature of the track, just something that's a little bit more unique. Also, like I think you could maybe work some of the elements a bit more, like the vocal. It's really cool. It works. It kind of fits to the vibe of the track. Really nice. But I think you could kind of put a few more delays on it, kind of make it evolve somehow, because it kind of comes in, it sits there, and then it goes away, and it comes back. But I think you could make it into a bit more of a kind of exciting or interesting element just through a bit of delay, a bit of reverb, some automation, that kind of thing. Yeah. The other thing that stood out to me is this high string that you've got in there. Works really well. It's kind of a classic timeless sound, but there were two things. Like one, it's very static and it's in there for quite a while, so it kind of became slightly annoying. I think just having it kind of moving in the panorama, maybe like just a bit of movement on it. Maybe if it were, you could put some kind of I use like RC20, which has got like a wow and flutter kind of thing, so it just adds a bit of like pitch shifting, very subtle. But you can do that with like anything that in Ableton. You could use the what do you call it? They've just changed the name of it recent in the new shifter, right? So you could drop shifter onto your pad and then drop a fucking guy is vacuuming the hallway outside my studio every Sunday. Where was I? LFO. Then you map this to the fine tune, bring the depth right down, change the rate, maybe add a bit of jitter, so you could do that just do it so it sounds right. You can do that to your pad. Then you could also add, to your string. You can add auto pan on a little bit, you know, kind of just adjust it till it sounds good. Add some reverb, add maybe some chorus, something like that. A filter, like, you know, just keep stacking these things on, but each one's really subtle, and then it just kind of feels like that string, that high string, is kind of moving and evolving. And another thing I would say is take the sidechain down a bit. It's quite harsh. So if you make that sidechain less apparent, less harsh, the pad will just kind of sit in there a bit nicer, I think. So, because it's the kind of element that it should be kind of in the background. It shouldn't really take your focus, and I felt like it was taking my focus away from other elements. The fact that it was just there and static. But yeah, pretty minor criticism, if you want to call it that. Yeah, but yeah, really cool track. I really enjoyed it, and I think, yeah, you're onto a winner there. I think you could just, you know, with the volume of music that comes out these days, I think it's important to find a balance between not following trends and that kind of thing, and writing timeless music, which you've done here, but also finding some kind of thing to make it stand out from the crowd, because there's literally like hundreds of thousands of records coming out every week, you know, and that's the kind of thing labels are looking at when they're signing demos as well. All right, Chris, let's go. Believe. Bit of a housey number, if I remember correctly.
tonight. If for right now I didn't need ya, touch of your skin, I'm a believer. I'm a believer. Ever, I'm a ever, ever. I believe, yeah. Believe, yeah. I believe, yeah. I believe, yeah. I'm soaring. I'm soaring, soaring, 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 I'm soaring.
All right, I think we'll call it there. Really cool, Chris. Really well done, mate. It all flows really well together. It kind of, I know what you're going for. You're going for something kind of, I guess, like Defected-y, Toolroom-y, that type of thing. And it's dope, man. I think the sound design is good. The drum, the beat is really cool. It works really well. The vocal fits. There was one thing that really stood out to me though, that is like everything in it is quite dry. That could well be on purpose. Like the different. So what I mean by dry, for anyone who doesn't know what I mean, is the use of like reverb and delay, basically. So having it dry the way you do, everything sounds punchy and kind of crisp and clear, which is great. But a few elements like the vocal and some of the synths, the piano, like it's a personal taste thing, right? Everyone mixes differently. I tend to put quite a bit of reverb and delay onto specific kind of elements in my tracks and in my mix downs. But I think it can really help to add vibe to a track. So I think having a bit more reverb, a bit of kind of subtle ping pong or slapback delay or something on that vocal could help it to sit in the track a bit more. You don't want to wash it out. A good way to do that is either using like in Ableton you can use an effects rack, so you can put it on the original channel, but then have like another. I'll just show you. You can. Where is it? Vocal. Like this. So I've actually done a video on this, but basically I've got the dry signal so let's just say this is on a vocal track. Got the dry signal coming through there, and then I add on top reverb, delay, chorus. This is just some high EQ saturation kind of thing, just to bring out the breathy nature of the vocal. And what I've got is on these like reverb chains, I've got it being ducked from the dry signal. So it's adding reverb and then it's being ducked away by the dry signal. So the dry signal really punches through. So the vocal sounds in front, but also big and atmospheric from the reverb and delay and that kind of thing. Or another way to do that in any DAW is using send returns or auxiliary tracks, however they're named in your particular DAW. But yeah, just adding a bit of that could give some really nice kind of vibe and atmosphere to the vocal. And also some of the synths and piano sounded a bit dry to me, especially without the delay. They kind of just happen and then there's no kind of tail. So I feel like when you use it subtly, it can help blend everything together a bit more, make it feel a bit more unified as the mix. So it kind of sounds like the track rather than like the beat, the bass, the vocal, the piano, that kind of thing. But it's a personal taste thing as well. So it's not necessarily right or wrong, but just for my taste, I think a bit more of that kind of atmosphere could help everything gel together a bit more. But, yeah, I mean that was the main thing that stood out to me. Otherwise, like, really well done. The sound selection and everything is great. Mix down's great. So well done. All right. Pintaro Brothers, Want You to Feel Me. Let's go. Man, that's really cool. I really thoroughly enjoyed that. I can just imagine playing that in like in a kind of dark underground club. Really like warehouse vibes. Love it. It's kind of like it's got a really nice balance of being kind of underground and gritty, but also with like a nice warmth to it. Yeah, I think that would go like absolutely go off on the dance floor for sure. In the right club. um, the kind of clubs I like to play. Uh, I really like the way that you introduced everything, especially the vocal. You know, it kind of like creeps in. It's really nice. When it does come in finally, I think it could be a little bit too loud. Uh, I've added some limiting on here. So with the limiting, what I'm doing is getting everything to around -8 LUFS. And there's two reasons for this. I think I was saying this before. I'm not sure if I finished it. But first of all is for the stream, so that everything is a similar volume. So it's not like going up and down in volume crazily when I play one track to the next. And the next thing is so that, so like when you're mixing a track, if you just mix it without any limiting, you're not really checking how it's going to sound when it's mastered, and it's eventually going to be mastered. You don't have to know how to master the track yourself, but it is, in my opinion, extremely important to check it with a limiter on, because what the limiter is going to do is reduce the dynamics, which means that things that are quieter are going to become louder, things that are louder are going to become quieter, or depending on how much limiting, maybe everything's going to become louder. But basically, like, the difference between the quietest and loudest parts gets reduced. So things like vocals, claps, hi-hats, kind of background elements like shakers and things like that can all come up quite a lot in volume. And if you're not checking that, then you can get like a master back that doesn't sound how you intended it, and that can actually cause some problems. Like there's people say a lot like, don't mix with a limiter on. I totally disagree with that. I think that comes from a time when music was not as limited, it was not as compressed. You know, the level, if you look at a track that was even like a house track that was released kind of 10 years ago, it's going to be much less compressed. 20 years ago, way less compressed. Even 5 years ago, less. Each one of those in each one of those time frames, though, there's getting more and more compression added. So we're at a point now where things are just really limited, and you can say whether you think that's a good or bad thing. It's irrelevant. That's just how it is. But if you're not checking your mix with that amount of compression on, then you're not really checking what your mix is going to sound like in the end. So basically, yeah, I think that vocal is getting pushed up a bit because of the limiting that I'm adding. It probably sounds quite balanced the way you've got it, but I think you want to really check it with a limiter on. Anyway, I'm always kind of ranting about this on these streams, but I think it's really important, just to avoid, just so that things sound the way that you want them to sound, really. But anyway, let's get back on track with the track. So the vocal comes in. I really like it. Then it kind of, again, it just kind of stays there. And I was thinking that's how it was going to be. I was going to suggest that you add some delay, add some reverb, add some effects to it, kind of make it evolve, make some cool trippy shit happen to it, because that would work so well in this track. And then you do it later on. And I was like, this is exactly what I wanted you to do. You know, like, you've got this build up here at the start, for example.
want you to feel me. I want to feel you.
So again, I think this vocals maybe just in general is a bit dry. Could be a taste thing, but I think it's going to sit in the track better with a bit of reverb and a bit of delay, just in general. Then what I would do, if this was my track, I mean I have it built into my template, but I've got different reverbs, different delays, saturation and things. You know, you can use what works for you, but basically I'd set up a bunch of different delays, some of them out of time, some of them crazy, some of them less crazy, and I would just like go through and automate little sends. You know, you could put and then you can do things on the channel and on returns to get it kind of going crazy. Like, let's see.
I want to feel you. I want you to feel.
Okay, so yeah, I've got another one here which is a bit more crazy.
I want to feel you. I want you to feel me.
So just, you know, kind of having that gradually build up through those breakdowns is going to create intensity and create like anticipation, and it's just going to work so well in the club, especially for the vibe of the track, you know. So I would definitely 100% do that. Then what I think you could do here, you could either build it up, get it all crazy, and then bring that away and have it come through. But what I would probably do is get it up, bring it up, build it up, get it all crazy, and then take the vocal away here. Then you can filter it back in the way you did and have it come in.
I want to feel you.
For like here, right? And then you kind of go through and do the same thing. So you're kind of constantly evolving and having this vocal move throughout the track, create tension and release, and just be a much more like dynamic, evolving interesting element in the track. Like it's kind of like the star of the show in a way. It's like the character of the track, and I think it deserves more attention in the production. So yeah, that's my advice on that. I think if you do that, you could have a absolute banger on your hands. So that's my advice. So Costin, good chatting to you on Instagram this week, my mate. Let's have a listen. Sorry, I'm just going to jump in here quickly. So this is a great example of this limiting thing that I was talking about before. I'm compressing the absolute hell out of this, And let's just take that off and have a listen to how it sounds. So it's a lot more subtle, right? What I'm doing to it is pushing all of that background, all of those hats and things up in volume. So it's not really as he's intended for it to be, which is unfortunate, because if you were checking it with the limiter, getting it to a loudness that it's going to be if it was released, then you can kind of make those adjustments and you can kind of pull that background, that kind of atmosphere down a bit, so that it's not so in front and so in your face. Man, that's really, really nice. I thoroughly enjoyed having a listen to that. And one thing that, like, I've been saying in a couple of the other tracks is about the kind of having the elements evolve and change, and yeah, just having movement. And you've done that so well. Like, things come in and they're kind of eased in gradually. but they don't just sit there. They don't just kind of enter the picture and then just exist. They're kind of moving, and like in the panorama, from kind of front to back, which meaning like more brightness with a filter or something, or more reverb, less reverb to kind of push them forward, push them back, pull them forward. And then there's always something interesting happening. So it's not like a really in your face track, but it doesn't. In fact, it's quite like laid back and understated. But there's always something happening. There's always something kind of moving or evolving. So I really like that. And I think that's something that on the surface it can be with this kind of music, like say with the tracks I do on bondage music, like compared to some of my other tracks, like they're so much more simple in terms of the number of elements. Like if I'm doing, say, a track that's got a vocal that's a bit more clubby, a bit more, I don't know, how do you describe it? Like a bit more progressive or something like that. You know, it's got more synths, more layers. It might have 50 tracks or something. Whereas one of the tracks I do on bondage might have like 20 or something, much less elements. But every one of those elements, I'm making it evolve over time. I'm changing it. If it's a hi-hat, I'm like changing the length of the decay. I'm like filtering it. I'm moving it in the panorama. So everything is kind of constantly changing and evolving, and it can you can have a track that's got a lot less elements sound like there's so much more going on, and by having the less elements there's more space for each of those elements to exist, but then you need to create atmosphere with those elements and keep things interesting. So I think you've done that really well here. The only thing that's like letting it down a bit is the mix. Like you can kind of again, I was adding a lot of compression to that, but you can kind of see just I think it's a really beneficial exercise for people to compare their waveform to the waveform of other tracks. So it's just another way of referencing. I'm not saying that you should reference with your eyes as a rule, but especially if you're in a less than perfect monitoring environment, then I think it's really important to look at things as well as listen to them, right? If you don't have great monitors, or you don't have an acoustically treated room, then you can't 100% rely on your ears, right? So you can compare your track to someone else's track with your ears, but you can also compare it visually. And by doing that, I can look at this instantly and see that your hats are a bit quiet, that your clap's a bit loud, that your bass is a bit quiet. And these are the big things of mixing. You know, you'll watch 100 YouTube videos about mixing, and people will say like, oh, you've got to compress everything, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. The thing is, getting the right balance and volume is the biggest part of mixing. That's what's going to get you like 80% of the way to a good mix, is the balance. And that's something that just takes practice. Like it's not, so if you can balance and pan your mix, you can get it to like most of the way to sounding amazing. Then the rest of it is problem solving, basically. Like, yeah, it's not, you mixing doesn't have to be super technical unless it needs to be. So basically, I've got a couple of videos on my channel, so you can go check them out in your own time. But I think, or give me an email and I can help you work through it, or mix it for you. But basically, just to sum up the kind of workflow for mixing that I use, I basically set the kick, I set the bass to the kick. Bass, you probably want it like 4 or 5 dBs quieter than the kick. 5 dBs, they're gonna, when you add some limiting, they're gonna become closer in volume. Then I mix in the clap, and I want it so that the kick and clap together, when the clap's playing, it's not adding more than kind of 2 dBs of additional gain, or additional volume, sorry. Then I'll mix in like the main hats, so they are about 3 to 4 dBs quieter, the main kind of offbeat open hat or whatever. So that the combination of those main hats is 3 or 4 dBs quieter than the kick. Somewhere between 3 and 5 dBs quieter than the kick, right? And then all of those things can be tweaked so that they sound right. But just setting them at those basically rough levels is going to get you a good starting point of your balance. And then the rest of the elements, you bring them in order of importance so that they sound right. I've got a video on that as well if you want to check it out. But that's basically how I go about getting a balanced sounding mix. But it's really important to get that foundation right before you kind of, it just makes the whole thing work. And it's really, it's the most important thing. So that's kind of like, doing that part of the mix is like going to get you 80% of the way there, and then just doing the balancing the volume of the rest of the elements is going to get you 80% of the way to a fantastic mix, so all right, let's keep going. Adria, really cool. Really enjoyed that. I think you've done like a really good job of kind of creating a lot of intensity in the track. Everything sounds like pretty like it's kind of meant to be there. Like nothing kind of stood out to me like, oh, that's a bit weird. Like, where did that come from? So I think really cohesive. Like everything's working well together. One thing is like with your drums, I think like you could probably make the kind of the arrangement of your drums a bit more dynamic, like it kind of comes straight in. Like everything's pretty much there the whole time. So I think you could kind of introduce your drums a bit more gradually, just some of the hats and that kind of thing. Just bring them in a bit more gradually, and it kind of will help this kind of intro to evolve a bit. And then also just either like take a couple of elements out, or put a filter on your drum group, put a filter on some of the hats, just take away some of those highs in the break. It's going to kind of create dynamics between the kind of the break and the drop. So if you take away the some of the highs, it kind of helps that break to feel a bit more settled, right? Then you can either slowly bring those back, like if you're using a filter or something, and then maybe add some reverb, that kind of thing, to kind of build it up. And then you can then or you can leave it filtered out, and then when it drops back in and you let those highs through again, it creates more impact in the drop, right? You can also use them to kind of signal transition, use things like that to signal transitions. So like before the break here, you could start like filtering something out, start filtering out one of your hats or something like that, and it kind of signals to the listener that something's going to happen. You can manipulate the energy in the track like that. The other thing, I felt like quite a few of the elements were very loud. So like you had some really cool synths, some cool vocals, but it kind of sounds like there's like a bunch of people or fighting to be in the front, right? A bunch, like everything's fighting to be in the front. I think some of them were maybe a little bit too loud, but that's maybe a taste thing. But what you've done is like you've got a bunch of different synths and vocal things that play. None of them are kind of in the background. So by having these like different dynamics between the elements in the track, you give it more depth, and then you also kind of give emphasis to some elements, which helps to create like intensity when that element plays. But it's like I don't know, it's when you're having dinner with a bunch of people and everyone's talking and the volume in the room raises, so then people are speaking louder, but it doesn't sound like anyone's speaking louder because everyone's speaking relatively louder. So it's kind of the same here. Like if everything's loud, then nothing sounds loud comparatively. So I think you could kind of play with the dynamics of those elements. So let me see if I can find it. There was this cool synth that you used on some of the drops and things. yeah, that kind of lead sound, like it could be, if you had some of the elements, like some of the vocals a little bit quieter, and then this comes in, and maybe with a bit more reverb or something, a bit more, a bit of distortion, and have it like kind of panning and moving across the panorama, but really quite loud. It's gonna be like much more dramatic. Like it's not quiet now, but because the vocal's really loud, the kind of synth stabs are quite loud, it wouldn't seem loud now. But I think so I think just play with the dynamics of things. Decide which is the most important element and when you want that to play, and that you want it to be in the front, so those elements can come in and out of being the most important thing or the main character, if you like, at different times in the track. Also, most of those elements are quite central, so either having them kind of pan or having something play on the left and something play on the right is going to kind of create more depth to your track. But in general, I think really, really cool track, really cool elements, works really well together. I think you could just, by working with some of those dynamics, you could really take it to the next level and make it a lot more engaging. All right, Dickie, I had a quick listen to this and I gotta say, I like it. All right. Well done, Dickie. I think that's really cool. What I like about it is that I've heard quite a few of your tracks now, and this felt to me like you're kind of pushing yourself a little bit to evolve your sound. It sounds maybe, yeah, a bit more unique, a bit more you than some of the other stuff that you've sent. I know we've spoken, and I know who your influences are and that kind of thing, and I think it's really cool to see you kind of pushing yourself in a slightly new direction. So I really love it. I think this has like great potential to be like a really awesome club track. There's a couple of like pretty fundamental issues with it, which are easily fixed. First thing I'll just say is, like, I've mentioned it in quite a few other tracks, but like evolving elements throughout the track. Like, so you've got this vocal that comes in, right? This it's there from the start, right? And it's there at the end, and it's exactly the same, and it's there everywhere, and it's exactly the same all the way through. You can have elements that are doing that, but and that could be an element that's doing that. But if that were the case, I would suggest to put it right in the background, right? So it's kind of like a texture. But at the volume that you've got it, I think you really want to make it evolve more. Like, so bring it in, filter it, or volume automate it in, and then have moments where it cuts out and doesn't play. And that's just going to help the listener, like, either not tune it out or not get annoyed by it. Because when it at the start of the track, I was like, that's really cool, it's adding a nice vibe. By the time it got to kind of here, I was starting to get annoyed by it, even though it's like it was one of the things that I liked about in the track at the start, right? So I think it's important to keep things fresh, keep things kind of turning over and evolving in the track. Now, the other kind of biggest issue I see in here is like the mix, and it's basically a volume. Actually, hang on, one other thing. Let's just have a look at this track here. And we can see where their kick is. Okay, we'll use this. Right. Their kick is around 50 hertz, and it's a G sharp F fundamental, okay? And it sounds right. It sounds like where you would expect it to be. Your kick is, I think it was like a C. It's like 65 hertz. It's got no sub. I think if you had a kick that was, or if you tuned this kick down by, like, even 5 semitones, I can try doing it. It might make the whole thing sound a bit crazy. Let's maybe go to complex. So C down to okay. So I'm not saying this is going to sound good, but it's going to sound more like a kick probably should. So you can kind of hear now, it doesn't sound, the track doesn't sound right, but the kick sounds more like the low end that you would expect. So this way, with the kick at this frequency, it sounds like it's really kind of thin, and it's kind of like going buh, 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 instead of boom, boom, boom. Yeah. Yeah, so, okay, cool, you've checked it. Yeah, so pitch that down, it's probably going to sound a lot better. But another issue is the kick is not as loud as it should be. You can, I think, yeah, I mentioned it earlier, but check the waveform. It's like your clap's really, really loud, but your kick should be like a whole, let's just use the EQ. And I'll put a low shelf here. See, like the kick, it just, when I lift that frequency up, that's a lot. That's 7 dB, you know. It doesn't sound good because it's not the way that you should do it, but it sounds more like you would expect it to be, right? So there's a couple of people in the chat. Dickie's saying that it was at -10. And Phil is asking how loud should the kick be. There's no right answer to that. It's not about how loud the kick is, it's about how loud it is relative to the other elements, right? So set your kick at a loudness that's going to give you space to this is so confusing, so hard. I understand why people have trouble with this. It's hard to explain even, right? So what I do, I set my kick so that my where is it on my master? Okay, so I have this gain plugin, right? Normally I have this at +7. I've got it set differently for this live stream, but normally I have this at +7 dB. So the reason I do that is I'm adding 7 dB so that I can take it away to make a pre-master easily, right? But I'm working to kind of roughly 0 here. But it's 0 with 7 dB added, right? So when I take it away, it's going to be -7. So where I will set my kick is around -4, -3.5, and everything else I'll set relative to that. I know that if I set my kick with that kind of amount of headroom, that by the time I add limiting and pull things up, it's going to be around 0, and other things, it's going to sound right, you know. So I'm leaving a little bit of headroom for my limiting and that kind of thing, which is going to pull it up. And I'm setting everything else relative to that kick. So the kick could be at any volume. It could be, you could have it, you know, the fader here could be at any volume. It doesn't matter. It's about how loud the other elements are comparative to that kick. and that's what gives the balanced mix, basically. Yeah. Anyway, so if that kick were a bit louder, if it was at a bit more of a kind of subby frequency, I think the whole mix would sound a lot better, a lot more kind of solid. The kick, you want it to be the driving force of the track. It's going to be the loudest thing in the club, and that's also a big part of what creates a groovy bass line, right? Is when the kick is playing and it's constant and it's subby and it's big, and then the bass is playing between those kicks, and it's that kind of interplay between the kick and the kind of the dynamics and volume of the bass and the kick that gives that kind of groove. If you're making something else other than house and techno, then that rule may not apply. But in house and techno, 99% of the time, that's going to be what's going to work best for your track. Other than that, I think it's good. Your bass is too loud, but I don't think it's necessarily too loud. I think it's just comparative to the kick. It's hard to judge. I think I was going to say something about the sound of the bass, but I think it's hard to judge when the kick is not at that frequency that it should be and not as loud as it should be. So I think fix those two things up and send it back to me, and I'll let you know if I've got any other advice about the mix there. But all in all, I think it's a really dope track, and I'd love to hear you finish it off, and maybe you can send it through to me to have a play in a club or something. All right. Just a reminder, I do have some videos about mixing and about setting the easy ways to get a good balance between your kick and your bass and your kind of like main elements of your track on my channel. So go check those out. I probably totally butchered that explanation and probably made you more confused than before. It's a complicated subject. Cool stuff. Nice to hear a bit of breakbeat in there. It's funny how cyclical music is. Like when I was first getting into electronic music in the kind of early 2000s, breakbeat was huge at the time, and yeah, it's interesting to see it all coming back a bit. Really cool. I like that. I think it's obviously everything else here is kind of like a club mix or an extended mix, so I'm kind of having to try and imagine what it would be like, because this is a bit under 3 minutes. So if it was a club mix, would it have more intro, that kind of thing? Because that would be one of my critiques, is that everything just kind of comes in right from the start. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. When I'm arranging tracks myself, I work on the kind of main part of the track, the main body of the track, the main break, the main drop first, and I do the intro and outro last, because I think when you've nailed that main part of the track, then it's much easier to kind of take things away to make an intro, rather than starting at the start and trying to arrange forward. I have never really had, or not never had success doing that, but I've always encountered much more problems and much more frustration, and it's also not what people are going to hear when they're listening to your track and deciding whether or not to play it or buy it, or yeah. Okay, it's just an edit. Cool, thanks for clarifying. Still, I think you want to have some kind of intro. It really does jam straight into it. I think first of all, your elements are really cool. They're working well. I think some of the, like this lead sound, this kind of plucky thing, it could be have a bit too much release on it, because you've got this amazing sounding bass in there. Like if I pull this out, and you've got a lot of atmosphere there. So I think you could use the filter frequency and the envelope of that synth to give some more space to those other elements, because I think that sub that you've got there is so cool. It's got like this really nice pitch bend on it, and then you've got this, which I could hear it, but it's just so washed out by this plucky synth. You've got this really nice kind of ethereal choir kind of pad there. And these twinkly kind of plucks or melody. At least for the intro, I think, and then you can use some automation and things to bring that pluck in. I think then making it a bit more plucky, maybe add some distortion, some chorus, move it around a bit in the panorama, because it's quite intense and quite relentless at the moment. Yeah, play with the volume of it, bring it in, bring it out, play with the filter on it, so bring it brighter, bring it duller. One other thing so I've talked extensively on these live streams about the volume of claps and snares, and on a 4/4 beat, I think I do this myself. I put a clap way too loud, and when I'm mixing, it's something that I notice every time pretty much that I'm like writing, and from that level that I'm writing at, I generally need to turn my clap down like 3, 5, sometimes even 10 dB, and to get it to sound balanced, right? When you're writing breakbeat and you don't have a kick underneath that clap or snare pushing it up in volume, you're gonna want to have it a lot louder and a lot more present, because what's happening here in your beat is where that clap or snare should really be slapping and like punching through the mix, because there's no kick underneath it, right? It just feels a bit flat and a bit empty. So that's, I think, if you're making a breakbeat beat, you want to really emphasize that clap, because it's the juxtaposition between the kick with the low end and the clap with the kind of snap in the mid range that creates the groove in that beat. So be careful of that, I think. You've also, I think you could maybe use I don't know, it's hard to say. Maybe something with a bit more top on the kick, to make that kind of punch through the mix a bit more as well. Could be nice. So these two leads that you've got playing are in very similar frequencies, and so I think panning one left, panning one right is going to be the obvious solution, but it could be also that you transpose one up or down, and then it gives space to both of them, because they're at the moment they're kind of like playing over the top of each other. But I think the vocal is probably going to be more interesting, because it also then it's like you've got these two intense leads in front, and then you bring in the vocal, and there's like no space for the vocal at that point. So I think like having those kind of synths a bit quieter, having the vocal a bit more, giving it a bit more space, is going to kind of help elevate the track and make it's just going to create space for that vocal, and then the vocal is going to have more impact when it comes in. Yeah, so I think if you bring up that, I think you're going to have like a really dope track on your hand if you let some space for that atmosphere to punch through, bring up the intensity of that clap or snare. I'd recommend like on Splice you'll be able to find some like kind of old school rave packs or something. Find a really cool breakbeat loop with an awesome crusty snare in it, and then just sample that snare from the loop. Or maybe the same pack will have like a snare, but something like really dirty and crunchy, that might have been run through like a hardware sampler or something like that, and just get that like smacking in there. Maybe quite a bit of reverb on a send, maybe even a gated reverb or something like that, just to give that some real attitude to that snare part. Take those leads down, pull them out to the side, let some of that atmosphere just come through, and I think the track's just gonna open up for you. Yeah. My buddy Victor has sent through Capiche Society. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar. Dickie, you'll definitely be familiar. Fantastic producer from Hungary, and he would like to have some feedback on this. Really love his stuff. I did a remix for him last year on James Cole's label, All I Want. Yeah, love his stuff. I think I play his stuff in most of my like radio shows, and often in my sets, and yeah, often in my charts. So I don't know why he wants feedback from me, but yeah. Really good producer and releasing on some fantastic labels like Ben Rao's label Meta. That was a great EP. He did a remix for Janssen's on Knee Deep in Sound recently, and yeah. Anyway, enough chit chat. Let's get into it. Love it. Really cool. It's got this super it's got a it sounds like something that I was playing when I first started getting into electronic music, when I first started DJing, like this kind of like Merc, Ralph Falcon, um, yeah, like Tribal America label kind of vibe. Like, yeah, really cool. Love it. I would say from a mix perspective, I think the kit could be a bit louder. It had a similar problem to some of the other tracks that I'd listened to. You can kind of see that in the waveform a bit. Not as, but I think just like maybe 2 dB or something on the kick is gonna give it a little lift and make it kind of punch through a bit more. Let's just try it here. But the bass sounds about right, so this is going to pull the kick and the bass up a bit. So I think, yeah, it's a bit difficult here because I think just a couple of dB on the kick is going to work wonders for that. I would also, just a taste thing, I'd like to hear a little bit more reverb on that clap, but I mean, it's a sick beat, and it's got this like real kind of throwback vibe, which is like really popular at the moment. Like it sounds like something that I might sample on vinyl. It sounds like, yeah, it's exactly the kind of stuff I used to play. I love it. I really like the way that where was it? Somewhere, this like organ pad that comes in. Yeah, super cool. I love that. I thought it was a bit strange when the second vocal comes in. I think not really needed. I think the track would sound a little more cohesive if it was maybe one other synth element or something that kind of came in, or maybe even like a percussion kind of hook that came in here instead of that second vocal, and then you could kind of use the second vocal for a different track. But that's just a taste thing. I find it a bit jarring when there's like two kind of disconnected vocals in one track. It can totally work, and it works like this. It's fine. But I just, for my taste, I think I would probably prefer if it was just the one vocal. It just feels a bit more polished to me. But yeah, I love it. I mean, this Victor is super prolific. Like, he sent me a playlist with some of his like unreleased tracks a while back, and I think there's like 50 or 60 tracks in there. Like, he's got so much music. He makes so much amazing music. So good stuff. I love it, man. Yeah, that's my advice. But hopefully that's helpful. Okay, so last one. Chris, I think your name was. On SoundCloud it was called QWERTY's Mate, self-titled. So I don't know if that's your artist name and the name of your track, or the name of your track, but let's take a listen. Chris, really cool track, man. I think definitely the most unique track from the live stream. And yeah, it's cool. Like, it's not following any it doesn't sound like it's following any kind of trying to be anything else other than what it is, which is really cool. Very unique and very it's got a really cool vibe, a really fun vibe to it. I think it could, from an arrangement perspective, it could be a bit more structured. Like I'm when I'm listening to it, I'm kind of going like, how would I play that in a DJ set? And I I don't know if I would, or I don't know if I could. It's like yeah, it doesn't have like a clear intro and outro, and maybe it's a work in progress. I'm not sure, but I would say like maybe just try and, if it's intended for DJs, then maybe try and structure it a little bit more. We give it a bit more of an intro and outro. At the end of the day, it's your track, it's your music, it's your art. You do what you want to do with it. But this applies to anyone that's writing music. If your intent with music is to have it released by labels and have DJs play it, then you need to keep those kind of stakeholders in mind when you're writing it. I'm a DJ myself, so I'm always keeping that in mind when I write music, and also when I'm listening to music. I think you've got some really cool sound design elements in there, but I think you've got a lot of elements that are quite forward in the mix, right? So you've got this bass that's got a lot of mid-range in it. You've got some synths that have got quite a lot of there's a lot of mid-range in the track, right? So the beat is really, really cool. I think it's got like a lot of character and a lot of vibe to it, which is awesome. This bass is really, really it's got such a nice sound to it, but it feels like there's it's lacking a bit of definition. That could be in the synthesis. Maybe there's a little bit too much attack on either the amplification envelope or the filter envelope. It could be lacking you might get some of that definition back by layering it with a sub, so that at least the low end is punching. But let me listen again. Yeah, so I mean, I think it could be a personal preference thing, but I think like if you cut back the filter a bit and use the amplification envelope to like in a bit more of an a bit more of a plucky kind of way. So it's a bit more like that, but then you can also hear your high end. Then you're going to leave space for some of these other synths as well. These like, I don't know what you call them, like laser kind of effects, are really cool. And the string also really cool, but I think just a bit too loud in the mix. You probably want to have them. They're also right down the center, so you could have that kind of laser thing on one side, have it a bit more subtle, and then have a little rest, like. So kind of take everything out, have the laser tail off a bit, and then the string also a little bit more quiet, happen and kick back, and I think that's going to sound a bit more kind of coherent and classy. Then after this point, you bring in these pads, which are a cool element, but it takes the track in a very different vibe, in a very different direction. So I think you need to decide what the track is, who is the track, because it kind of like you create a lot of energy here, and then the drop is pretty chilled. Well, you can create a lot of anticipation here with this like big build up, right? Then that kind of theme continues on through the track. You kind of have these big energetic build ups, and then the release is not equal to the tension that you're creating through those build ups, I think. So I would just kind of like I put my phone in the back because I noticed on the other previous streams I had been getting some of that kind of annoying phone interference. I think it's through the USB microphone that I'm using here. But anyway, yeah, I think, where was I? I think, yeah, deciding kind of like what you want the track to be and what elements in the track make it that way is really important. So then, because I know it can be like very tempting to, you work on a track, you come up with different elements, maybe you spend a lot of time on sound design for each of these elements, and it's tempting to leave them all in the final project, right? I think a really big skill that's important to develop is to take things out of your track. Like what the things that you take out of your track are just as important as the things that you put into your track. So I think you've got everything that you would need there to make a really amazing, like really fun, really kind of raw, funky house track. But there's some elements that are kind of conflicting and diluting the message is maybe or sending mixed messages. So I think just take a step back from it, have a think about what it is that you want to do with the track and which elements are doing that, and take the rest out. But great, like fun vibes. If it was arranged in a bit more of a DJ friendly way, it's something that I would love to play. It's unique, and Chris, I don't think it needs anything added. I mean, so this is the funny thing, is when people often will send me a track and say, like, I get sent a lot of tracks by a lot of people, and I appreciate that everyone puts their trust in me to give them feedback on their music. But 90% of the time they're asking me I don't know what to add to my track. What should I add? What does it need? Most of the time it doesn't need anything. It's about reducing the number of things that are in there, or rebalancing the things that are in there to give to create more dynamics between those elements, or just manipulating them over time so that they remain interesting for the listener. I think that's what most of, like, tracks don't need to be complicated in terms of the number of elements in there. It doesn't mean it's easy. It's not easy to make a track with few elements where every element counts and every element is like really bringing something to the table. It's some people who, I think that's maybe the thing that separates a good producer from a great producer. You know, I'm not, and I don't categorize myself, put myself in that category, but it's something that I aspire to do, is to make great music with as fewer elements as possible. I think that way you're able to kind of tell a more impactful and meaningful story, and it's going to be more timeless. And but it doesn't, it means it's difficult to kind of get that message across with less elements. You have to think about each of those elements more and make sure that they're all adding as much value as possible. So that's a bit of a rant away from your track, Chris, but yeah, I think just having that idea in general is going to make anyone a better producer. All right, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Anyone that wants to get hold of me for mixing, mastering, or like mentoring sessions, there's info in the bottom of every video, so hit me up on my email and we'll arrange something. Thanks to everyone who sent in tracks. I know it's like a bit scary and a bit intimidating to put yourself out there and have your art out there on the internet, especially if you're a kind of newer producer and haven't released a lot of records or not 100% sure of your skills or whatever. So I appreciate you putting your trust in me to give you some feedback, and hopefully I was able to give you feedback that was helpful and can help you elevate those tracks and hopefully, yeah, get them released and or do whatever you want to do with them. But yeah, we'll catch you next time, and thanks very much.